American spends a year living in Europe and doesn't learn a damn thing. Folks, this is Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist. That probably should be the title of this video. Look, I'm going to be reacting to this video from Drew Binsky. The guy has almost 4 million subscribers, and he says he's been living in Europe for a year, and he points out 18 cultural differences between USA and Europe, of which pretty much none of them are actually true. Now, this surprised me, and I'm doing this in my channel because it just goes to show how these preconceived notions affect your criteria, how you basically end up seeing what you want to see, even if that's not true. And even on another level, given the content of my channel, I think it's important to be objective in your analysis, especially for things like relocating, bugging out, places to live in, which is something that I also address here in the channel. You know, stuff like, oh, okay, no, you cannot own guns in Europe. Really? You sure about that? That's actually not true. And a bunch of other things. Let's go right into this thing and comment as we go.
Europe are similar in size, population, standard of living, and lifestyle.
Oh yeah,
but as an American myself, after spending more than 1 year of my life in Europe and visiting every single country on the continent, there are some major cultural differences that need to be addressed. Bonjour!
First thing, the idea of referring to Europe, I know that most people understand that Europe is a number of countries, well, it's 27 EU countries and a bit more in in Europe as a continent. You just cannot say Europe any more than you can just say America. Oh, you're an American? Right, from Brazil, right? No, that's not an American. I'm an American from the United States. No, but it's a fucking continent. You're an American, right? Brazil, America. It is the exact same thing. It is just as stupid to assume that a guy from Brazil has the same life experience as a guy that lives in Texas, right? Simply because it's the same continent. In fact, they are so deeply rooted, such differences that have gone back thousands of years, different languages, different cultures. You just cannot just say Europe any more than you can say just America and think that someone from Paraguay is anything like someone from Boston.
Disclaimer, I know it's impossible to group Europe into one category. So these are general
Yeah,
realizations that may not exist in every European country. Here are 18 cultural differences that Europe has over the USA. Second bourgeois in Paris. 1. Pay to use public toilets. It's not free to pee or do your business.
Depends where you are, man. I'm sure that there's some place where you put a coin and you will go into a toilet. But in general, like, you know, train stations, airports, malls, and a bunch of our public places, you know, parking lots, fairly common. You will have toilets that you don't have to pay a damn thing. And, you know, of course, if you're in a restaurant, you are using it, sure. And even if you're not, I mean, I've had more than once had the experience of, especially with little kids, oh, can I please use your restroom? I need to take it. Yeah, go ahead. Even if you're not even a client, it will rarely be the case that they go, oh, clients only. I mean, personally, never happened, and I've done that a few times. But usually you have some place that you don't have to pay for. I've never paid for going into a toilet anywhere in the world, and certainly not anywhere in Europe. Could be, but it's not as if you have to pay because there's plenty to go around.
In public, you have to pay usually €1 to use the bathroom, even if it's just to wash your hands. 2. Water is not free. When you order water in a restaurant, it usually comes in a tiny glass bottle.
About free, well, nothing is free really in life. Even tap water is technically not free pretty much anywhere. But yes, if you go into a restaurant and ask for water, they will give you bottled water and they will charge you for that as expected. It is an American thing to hand you over a glass of tap water with ice. Culturally, the kind of idea of service, and also a lot about how much salt Americans usually eat, which is far more than your average person in Europe, no matter in what country that is. But it's still not true. I mean, there's actually a directive from that evil European Union, from those unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. They have like a drinking water regulation thing that they came up with, basically where you have to provide water to people in restaurants and bars. And again, because each country in Europe still is very much a sovereign state, they can implement this pretty much as they go. But most countries in Europe that you're visiting, if you ask for tap water, if you're not specific, if you just say bottle of water, they will bring you bottle of water, which is, commercially bottled water. But if you ask for tap water, it's gonna be free. In France, it's been free since the 1980s. It's by law, I think it's free for them they have to provide you with a free tap water if you ask for it. In Spain, tap water is free in any establishment that they're serving you. So you just ask for it. It's not I think in Netherlands, it's not the case, and they will charge you. I mean, at the end of the day, you're sitting there, you are receiving service. So it's not all that wrong, at least the way I see it, that they're charging you for some kind of service, unless it's, excessively so. But even there, in Netherlands, they're pushing for, hey, the European regulation says you have to provide this, and yeah. And one of the awful lies I've seen is that it's not safe for drinking. You have no damn idea. Water in all of the European Union is much safer than the standards of the World Health Organization. It's definitely healthier than the water that you have tap in the United States, in most cities and states in US. The standard is a lot higher, and yes, unless you specifically ask for tap water, chances are you'll get handed bottled water and you'll be charged for it. But it's not the case that you have that pretty much in all places.
2 to 5 euros. They love sparkling water too, so make sure to tell them you want still water. Can I get a still water, please? Travel tip: carry around an empty water bottle and fill it up in sinks or public fountains. It's all purified.
No, it's not all purified. In fact, it's so much not all purified that in places like fountains in Rome and in other parts of Europe, they have to put specific little signs. Don't drink from this, you dumbass. If it's a fountain with a little, angel and it's water pouring out of the mouth of that little statue thing, don't drink that. It's probably treated so as to keep that display safe and so as to avoid algae formation and that sort of thing. So it may have some ingredient there added. Now, yes, you do have public fountains, and that is going to be safe for drinking, but it's not that all water is safe. If you're visiting Rome, you have some 1,000-year-old aqueducts that still provide water in the city, and it is the best tasting water you will ever drink, which is pretty awesome.
3. Every city has history.
Every city has history, yes.
In America, we don't have much to talk about before the 17th century. In Europe, some castles are 500 years older than the US even became a country. 4.
That is true. I mean, yes, of course. Cities in Europe, across Europe, and even small towns, it wouldn't be rare that you're staying in a hotel that is 300 years old. And that is pretty awesome, but it's not the case that it's all like that. Many newer cities don't have that much of that long of a history. In fact, some of the newer cities and places you see may be not as old as some of the older ones in the United States. Yes, of course, the United States is a lot more recent than Europe, that's been there for, there's places that are 2,000 years old and they're still standing. But it's not always the case.
They drive less. Public transportation is everywhere and efficient in Europe.
Okay, again, partly, yes, it is true. Public transportation in Europe is a lot better, is a lot more efficient, and it is used by middle class or upper middle class or even rich people. Those people that may have, I don't know, $200,000 worth of cars, and the guy still uses a train because it's just more convenient. I mean, I found myself in that position many times. I want to drive, I just want to walk today. So I just go walking, I just step on the train that goes by every 5 minutes or so. I have a great view of wherever it is that I'm at. Usually that's going to be the case. And it's just more convenient many times. The infrastructure is more geared towards people walking and using public transportation. Not rarely the case that you go on holidays and you take the train from the airport to the city that you're staying in.
And most cities are pedestrian and bike friendly. There's really no need for a car, and gas is too expensive anyways.
That is where he fucks up yet again. There's no need for a car. Really? Yes, there is. You still want to have a car. You still go shopping. You still travel to cities further away where it may not be as convenient to go on a train. Again, sometimes it's just more enjoyable to take a super fast speed train with that great view, and you just sit there like in a very very cool, like he showed there in a part in the beginning of the video. But you still need a car. I mean, it's gonna be the case that probably not as many cars as in the United States. Maybe a guy in the US has 3 or 4 cars. Maybe in Europe he's gonna be having maybe 1 or 2 cars, and maybe of more expensive, better quality. It's usually going to be lots of Audis, BMWs, and some of the fancier cars, fancier for US standards, and not all that much of a big deal for the places in which these cars are actually made, which is, in this case, Europe. And the idea of gas being too expensive, that is fucking nuts. Yes, it is more expensive, but it's not too expensive. He's implying that cars are kind of like a luxury, which they are not. They're pretty much as affordable as they are in the United States, maybe even more so these days. And one of the things that I particularly like is I like diesel engines. I think they go longer, better, it's a more reliable fuel, and from the perspective of preparedness, just make a whole lot more sense than gasoline. I just don't understand why gasoline is even a thing when you have diesel. Anyway, you will not find many people that don't have a car in Europe. I mean, someone very young living in a city, somewhat like a young person in the middle of New York City would not have a need for a car, right? Maybe some people very young, but usually people do have cars. It is the case, though, that they usually like manuals, even the newer ones. There's more automatics day by day, but still very much the case that even new vehicles, you almost always have the manual option. Maybe it's a little bit less popular than it used to be. Still, like 70-80% people like manuals, and the idea of driving an automatic car makes me want to throw up, but it is what it is.
5. Sports are not a family affair. In the States, we
Dead
pregame
wrong.
and drink beers and tailgate for sports games with our families and friends. In Europe, sports aren't such big events, except for soccer, which they love.
Except for soccer. First of all, it's football, and except for football, as if it's nothing, it is by far the most popular sport in the entire planet. Do you have an idea how ignorant you just sound? It is huge. Football in Europe and the rest of the world, it is massive. The only place in which is not really much of a big thing, I mean, Lionel Messi is now playing in Miami, and you probably saw a little bit of that, but it is massive in the rest of the world. The idea of Europeans not having family-friendly sports, that is ridiculous. First of all, football is massive. Yes, it is very much family-friendly. I mean, except maybe for some of the more hardcore fans in some of the classics. But even then, it is very much a family event. And just because you play American football and wait there in your cars, in your parking lots, that makes it more family. I mean, it's not just football. I was in my son's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition, and it is family friendly. There's lots of kids competing and eating there and having fun. It is just not true. He has no idea what he's talking about.
6. Smaller food portions. This is the size of a normal meal in Europe.
Again, generalizing, typical American, Europe. No, depends on where you are, depends what kind of restaurant you're in. If you're usually in a fancy, nicer place, both in Europe, which is a bunch of countries, and in the United States, usually nicer, finer places will have human-sized portions. Now, if you go to the cheap crab place, you will have your land whale size of crab, which usually is a lot lesser quality. But even then, if you want to go to a free-for-all buffet, all you can eat, you have those. They're not as popular as they are in the United States for obvious reasons. Usually in Europe, you will want to have a little bit more higher quality. Now, the portions are related to the quality of the place you are and the kind of place you're going. If it's more of a homey, traditional place in whatever country you're in, usually sizes will be larger. It's going to be more of a hearty kind of meal, right? Again, it will depend. You could say that in general, yes, portions are smaller, quality is a lot better of the basic ingredients of what you're eating. But if you want to have your McDonald's, you can have all of that in pretty much any major, medium, or small size city. All of the traditional fast food places that you know of, they're all over Europe. And if you want to eat like a pig, yes, you have places like that. They're kind of frowned upon a lot more than the United States. You're kind of like an animal if you just go eat all you can get. Even they're now trying to make more of the refilling of your drink, like you have a soda, right? You're going to an American-style restaurant, right? Burgers and fries and all of that, more of that later, and you will get a refill. And it's kind of, I already drank like half a gallon of Coke. Do I need even more now? But it is becoming a little bit more of a thing. It's still not popular and definitely not.
And this is a standard Coke.
Bullshit. This is not. Look. This is
also.
That's a standard Coke, he said?
This is a standard Coke.
No, it's not. Nowhere in Europe is that a standard Coke. That is just not true. The guy is a pathological liar. I mean, maybe that's his thing. That's why he has 4 million subscribers. That's not a standard Coke anywhere that I know of. Not in Latin America, not in Europe, certainly not in the United States. Is that a standard Coke in the United States? Of course not. You know what a standard Coke is in the United States, or a standard can of any soda. Well, it's the same in Europe. The same standard of can of Coke that you have in US, that's the same that you have all over Europe. It's the same, larger than that. You know what I'm talking about. That's the standard of sodas. Now, you can buy that little thing in grocery stores and supermarkets. You can buy tiny ones. It is not common at all. It's actually kind of rare to find, and you have to go to the bigger supermarkets to find that, but that's not standard by any stretch of the imagination. It is the same standard can that you see for most sodas in US and in Europe. You do find a little bit of the in some supermarkets you find, and I like those, the glass bottles, and if you combine that with the Coca-Cola recipe used in Europe, which is similar to one in Mexico, which is real sugar, it tastes a lot better, and it tastes even better when it's coming out of a glass bottle without the aluminum taste. Still crap soda, but that is not a standard can of Coke in Europe.
Also, ketchup is not free in...
No, it is. It is free. What are you even talking about? If you go to a McDonald's, to any fast food place, you will have a handful of ketchup, little things thrown your way. If you go to a traditional burger place, you will have free ketchup. If you go to one of the many, if you go to Hard Rock Cafe, if you go to a number of American-style restaurants where they serve burgers and kind of stuff you usually find, that's going to be free ketchup as much as you want. What are you even talking about? It may be the case that if you go to, and this seems to be the case, if you go to a restaurant where you're not expected to eat ketchup and you want some, yeah, sure you go. 50 cents or whatever it is they're charging you for, that's going to be the case. But it's not common at all. The only place I can think of is in Rome. I went to a place that supposedly has the best burgers in all of Italy, and it was pretty awesome. It was expensive, but it was great. It was just one guy preparing, serving the food, and it was just one-man operation. And that guy, in theory, makes the best burgers in all of Italy. And yes, they were fucking glorious. And the ketchup, he was like, "Yeah, you want ketchup? Okay." And he charged that separately. It was like, again, 50 cents or something like that. And it was like a little cup thing with a ketchup with a spoon. And it was fucking delicious, specially custom homemade ketchup or something like that. But it's really not traditionally the case. You will have free ketchup for your fries and burgers wherever you're expected to eat that.
Bottles. Seriously? 7. Cigarettes are fashionable. They aren't so looked down upon among Europeans either. I guess they don't have the dare.
It is very much looked down upon. It is a disgusting habit. And some countries smoke more than others. Eastern Europeans usually will smoke more. It is still very much the case that is not fashionable, and the younger generations mostly look down on it. Now you have a lot of this vaping crap, and some dumbass may think that it's still cool to smoke, but in your middle to upper class level, it is still a disgusting habit, and it is not the thing that everyone in Europe is smoking like a fucking chimney.
Words, smoking equals cool. 8, They dress nicer. They don't just throw on basketball shorts, a university t-shirt, and sandals. Sup, dude?
Dude, you're dressing like everyone in Europe in summer. That what you're wearing now? Yes, even with American colleges and stuff like that, that is... This guy, you could drop this guy in any country in Europe in summer, and he would be just exactly the same. You wouldn't tell a difference. You wouldn't go like, "Oh, that's an American." This is the bias that some people have. You could say that in general, people in Europe dress a little bit nicer, especially in places like Italy, in France. Across Europe, you can say that most people do dress a little bit nicer and look after their appearances a little bit better than the standard of the United States. Now, if you go to Manhattan and you see a young, hip girl walking, she's gonna be probably rather nicely dressed. And yes, of course, in Rome and places where fashion is very much a thing, you can see that more. But the idea of him wearing American, there's no longer anything that is exclusively American clothing that will attract the attention of the crowd.
They always dress to impress.
No, I mean, you will see some older gentlemen every once in a while, but it's not the case that everyone wants a fucking suit. And the man bun, come on.
Those haircuts.
No, that is not your traditional European. This is still the kind of thing that even walking in a street in any country in Europe, you would look at, douchebag. Okay, yeah, nice.
9. They can speak multiple languages. It's not uncommon to meet Europeans who speak 4, 5, or 6 languages fluently.
It is very rare. It is 6 languages. Fuck. That's again, partial true in terms of, yes, in Europe, most countries have actually better education than the public education in the United States, which means that it's going to be including some kind of second language. Pretty much all over Europe, it's going to be English. So your average European guy from a public school will probably speak English fluently enough that it's going to be, it's at least 2 languages. And in some places, they throw in French or Spanish. I mean, and some countries are a little bit better than others. In the Swiss will probably speak 3, 4, 5 languages, and 4 of them kind of fluently, or at least 3 of them, right? In Nordic countries, the kids that travel, I mean, it's surprising that a kid from Sweden will speak Swedish, English, and Spanish, 3 of them fluently, and maybe even French as well. But it's not that everyone in Europe speaks 6 languages, and 6 languages, that will be extremely rare, like this guy is doing now.
Here is very good. Das Bier ist ausgezeichnet. To pivo je výborný. Je to pivo očem vkusné. To pivo je veľmi dobré.
10.
Not all that common. It's going to be some well-educated guy that lives kind of in that region.
Recycle more. Metal cans, plastic, paper, bottles. Europeans recycle more and take better care of their environment. In Germany, the government incentivizes you.
Kind of the evil the evil non-elected bureaucrats in Brussels, they kind of have tight standards, and I have no problem with, especially when it comes to water pollution, air, and such things. But it's not as if everyone is recycling everything. You still have, I mean, just like in the United States, there's places in which you have the different cans and stuff like that, but usually you have just the one thing.
25 cents for returning an empty bottle. Empty water bottles can make you rich in Germany. Many Americans.
I think the guy exaggerates everything he says. So Germany, you get 25 cents for just throwing that bottle, recycling that. Sure, I think that's great. I mean, fantastic, you get 25 cents, but you're not getting yourself rich by recycling plastic bottles in Germany.
Americans seem to throw trash on the streets without...
Let me know, Americans do that? Americans just go walking and throw... Again, the guy exaggerates everything. Do you go walking in the United States just throwing crap all over the place? What kind of lunatic does that?
Thinking about the consequences. 11. Coins actually matter. Don't lose your euros. This handful of coins is 20 euros or 24 US dollars. If these were quarters, it'd be about $3. See the difference?
So $3 don't matter in the United States anymore? I mean, I know inflation is bad, but again, he's just exaggerating and saying things that aren't true at all. If you have a handful of quarters, you may have $3, $4, $5 worth of quarters, right? Or coins. I mean, yes, it is true that €1 or the €2 coin, which he's not showing, but it's very popular, and especially with the prices being lower in Europe, yeah, with a couple euros, you can buy something to eat. It's not going to be garbage. But the idea that, in the United States, coins don't matter anymore, quarters don't matter?
Difference? 12. Toilets have 2 buttons. This makes a lot more sense, right? Big ones for poop, small ones for pee, to save a lot of water every flush. Also,
that is, again, half true. This is true. This is very much true, right? You do have those 2 buttons, and this is, again, European standard of, this is when the EU gets in and says, yeah, this is a standard, you have to abide by this, just like with the chargers, right, for phones, like they're doing with Apple. They say, you know what? I don't give a fuck that you're Apple. You still need to have a USB Type-C because that's the standard. If not, you cannot sell your crap here. And then they adjust, which is fine. I have no problem with having things that make life easier for you. In this case, this is again a regulation by which any toilet that is approved to be installed needs to have these 2 buttons. Why? Because it saves water. And having used a number of these over the years, I can tell you, it makes perfect sense. I don't have a problem with this being a thing. And I think it makes perfect sense. But then he goes on and starts with the bullshit.
Small one for pee to save a lot of water every flush. Also, bathroom sinks are tiny.
No, they're not. You just found the tiniest ass little sink you've ever came across. I don't think I've ever seen a sink this small anywhere certainly not in Europe. I mean, I've seen some huge ass ones. Some of the more modern ones, you know, the ones I'm talking about, that are like a huge fucking pool of a sink. I mean, you see those all over the place because they're popular. The ones I have in my house are all of different sizes, and the same goes for wherever you are in Europe. There's no regulation in terms of sinks, so just finding a tiny sink and saying, "Oh, this is how sinks are in Europe," that is not true.
Like for little kids. 13.
But again, it's this preconceived idea, it's this bias of everything in Europe is tiny. No, you just found something tiny somewhere, which, you know, I don't even know where that would even be. But you're trying to make that a thing when we know it's not.
Electric cars. It's more and more common to drive small electric cars in Europe. Once again, better for the environment.
No, it's even, I would say it's becoming less and less of a thing. People do realize it's a very inconvenient thing to drive around electric, especially when you, I mean, he says, oh, you can just pull up anywhere and charge.
You pull into these parking spaces and you charge it. So simple.
No, it's not like that. It's not super simple. It's actually so inconvenient that people are actually driving less electric cars. So maybe a little bit ahead of the curve than in the United States, where now they're realizing that all of those Teslas, it's a pain in the ass. In Europe, and yes, cars being tiny, cars will be usually smaller in Europe, especially when you compare it like Texas, where everyone drives a pickup truck even if they don't even need it. Europe is going to be a little bit more of smaller cars. It's going to be maybe even fancier, more expensive cars, at least in terms of what you know in the United States. BMWs, your Audis, and the size of the car, especially in some of the older cities where have medieval streets and parking lots can be a little bit complicated. Usually there, a smaller car is convenient. And by smaller, I don't mean a tiny ass little car like the one he was showing there, like these little things. That's the kind of thing that a college kid or someone that's on a very low income probably will drive. But if not, you have a full-size car or SUV, which is not huge, but yeah, usually, especially for driving. In Europe, people drive a heck of a lot. Maybe not commuting as much, but for holidays, and because the infrastructure and roads is a lot better in the United States, it's used a lot more by people for traveling between countries. So for that, you want a decent car, not that little bug. But yeah, people in general will have smaller cars than in the United States in general, but it's not a thing like everyone is now driving a tiny electric car. Come on.
These parking spaces and you charge it. It's so simple. 14. Fewer trash cans. I never had this problem back home, but in Europe, it always seems like there's a trash can every 2 miles. But believe it or not, the streets are clean.
The streets are clean because what you just said is not true. There's more than enough trash cans anywhere that you go in Europe, especially any place that is kind of touristy, like what you're showing there. The reason why it's clean is because what you're saying is simply a lie. There's trash cans all over the place, and you don't have to walk a mile to find a trash can. They are plentiful, and maybe in some little town with 0 tourists in fucking Poland, you will find that there's not a trash can in every corner. But in general, any place, any downtown area, any place where there's restaurants, tourists, you will have a trash can in every corner, pretty much in any part of Europe that is needed.
15. Street signs are tricky. Can't find the street sign? Look on the building.
It's not tricky. It's a matter of not filling up the streets with huge ass signs. Yes, in cities you will find that they try to make them smaller. I mean, you will see them. You're in every corner as expected, as he's actually showing. But I don't know what's tricky about that.
It's usually there. 16.
No, and when you're in the highways, you're actually going to find more signs and better indications than in the United States. That is a lot more taken care of than in US, no doubt. Especially, again, broad in general. When you're driving in the highway, you will find better roads and better signs to navigate.
Dinner is an all-night activity. Expect to spend 3 or more hours schmoozing and eating with your friends at the dinner table.
Again, I think the guy is either lying through his teeth, he's insane, or he just exaggerating things. 3 or 4 hours? Where in the world would you spend 3 or 4 hours every night eating? That is not true anywhere in the world. And even in places where they traditionally are a little bit more laid back or spend more time eating and so on, it's not going to be every night 3 or 4 hours. Who has the time for that?
In the US, if we wait more than 5 minutes to get our check, we talk to the manager. Don't be in a hurry.
Okay, so now he's talking about service manager. I mean, again, depends on where you're going. If you're going to a nicer restaurant, yes, you will have better service, and yes, you may come across a more laid-back waiter. Sure, it could be. And yes, that is a thing maybe in the United States where the idea is someone quickly there. But you won't stop the guy from taking his time to cook the meals because, at least for some Americans, it seems to be that the idea of going to a restaurant is having something thrown into a microwave. If you're going to a good place where they're actually cooking food for you, you will have to wait because that's simply the nature of homemade or restaurant-made quality food, right?
If you're going to dinner with Europeans. 17, they love the outdoors. You'll notice this by seeing tons of parks and outdoor cafes all over Europe. They love their leisure time, and they don't use their phones as much as we do.
Again, yeah, maybe in cities, more parks. Yes, you could say that people in Europe are a little bit more outdoorsy than your average guy in the United States. I mean, you know perfectly well, there's lots of people in the United States that enjoy the great outdoors a heck of a lot too. Yeah, you could say as in the case of Europe, people are a little bit more outgoing, a little bit more involved in doing sports and being in nature. Especially if you live in a large city, the park will be the only place where you find that. So yeah, people go, again, like in the case of if you live in Manhattan, you will go to a park because you're living in a damn apartment, so you don't have that. But the idea of people in Europe using less cell phones, unfortunately, that is not true. It's a problem everywhere, and especially the younger generations have their face glued to screens mostly all day long.
18, longer vacation. Many European countries, like France, have 6 or more weeks of vacation, or holiday as I call it. In the US, 2 weeks would be generous. So,
again, this is true. You will, and this is regulated laws in different countries in Europe, and the basic rights for workers, like generalized for all of the EU. Yeah, you will have, I think it's 4 weeks. Depends exactly where you are, but it's not the case that in the United States you cannot have your own arrangement of having more holidays. What I will say though is this: yes, in the case of Europe, you're having more holidays and you're having like more days off because of different holidays, national ones or whatever holiday is, where there's a day in which you don't work, and people usually take advantage of that, especially in Europe, where maybe an hour away in a plane is like you're in Paris or you're in Germany, and whatever you want to visit is probably 1 or 2 hours away with a 30 or 40 euro ticket, which is like $40-50 worth of a plane ticket. You spend a weekend in Paris, right? And sometimes people go for 1 day or 2 because it is close and it is cheap to go. But in terms of how many weeks, I'm pretty sure that people in the United States make their own arrangements, and even though you don't have by law a certain amount of holidays, nearly as much as you have all over European countries, which is a little bit more generous in that regard. I'm pretty sure that if you have a specific arrangement, especially when you have more time working for that company, you may ask for more time, and whoever is your employer may agree to that or not. But yeah, that would be would be one of the few things he's actually correct. Yes, people in Europe get more time off work, more holidays. But other than that, man, this is a huge...
Did I miss anything on this list? I'd love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, you pretty much got everything wrong, dude. I'm not sure why. Again, it's probably this preconceived idea that you brought already. I mean, since you think that 25 cents in Germany makes you rich, I wouldn't be surprised that if you think that spending a couple of weeks traveling across a couple of countries in Europe means you've been living there for a full year. I don't see how you can make such massive, huge mistakes. The Coke thing was funny because I rarely see that little can anywhere. It's not common at all. And, well, same goes for most of the things he was pointing out. My point is, be smart, make it, and this is so important right now, guys. Again, given the context we're living in these days, make your own mind, think for yourself, gather your own information, and take everything with a huge grain of salt. There are narratives, there are perspectives that sometimes we bring along because we heard that this happens in the United States or this happens in Europe. Probably not entirely true. So make up your own mind, do your own research. Be smart. Take care. See you next time.